Hello, hello, hello. I'd like to start the meeting, please. I'd like to start by welcoming everyone. Thank you very much for being here. And I'd want to take this opportunity to remind everyone to treat all members of the committee with respect and to accord the same respect to officers and our guests. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Can I please begin with apologies for absence? I have apologies from Councillor Jill Manley, and Councillor Lakshmi Atwar is kindly acting as a substitute. Thank you. Are there any other apologies? Great. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have any declarations? Fantastic. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can the panel please confirm that these are true and accurate record of the previous meeting, and are there any matters arising? Great. I'll take it as agreed. So let's start with our first item on the agenda, which is Merton Regeneration. We have Brian Ham, the Director of Major Projects for Clarion, and Kate Williams from Clarion. I will take this. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you for sharing the slides. I'll take the slides as read, so we don't have to go through them again, but I will ask if there's anything you want to add to the slides, and if you'd like to speak for a couple of minutes, then please do. But can I quickly remind the panel that due to an upcoming planning decision to be taken by Merton, there will be no discussion on the Majestic Way scheme this evening, so as to not prejudice a live planning application. But we can talk about all the other material in the slides. Brian and Kate, is there anything you'd like to add in addition to what has already been circulated to the panel?
I don't think so. The only highlighted slides.
Apologies, Brian. I think we're having some technical issues with the audio. Bear with us for 2 seconds.
You know? Do you want me to say something for test?
Can you hear me, Ross?
We can hear you, but you're very, very quiet. So it's not the case of not being able to hear you. It's just the volume.
Okay.
It's back there. Could someone online please say something so we can check the...
Yes. Take this as a test statement. Is that all right now?
We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. The only thing I wanted to emphasise is the progress to date on the 3 estates. Page 8 on High Path and later pages on Eastfields and Ravensbury. Because we're acutely conscious of the delays that there's been through the regeneration programme, the most recent delays coming from the need to redesign buildings to accommodate second staircases for building safety reasons, and the inevitable delay that there will be by going through the building safety regulator. We've internally badged what we call Project 2030, which is our new aspiration to try to get all tenants rehoused on the estates by no later than 2030, which is leading us to look at accelerating the delivery of social rented housing on the estates. It's not so bad on Ravensbury because there's only 16 families yet to be rehoused on Ravensbury, but it's become obviously an issue for residents on High Path and Eastfields. So we are going through a design exercise at the moment to see how this can be accommodated. As the slides say, the aim is to look at the feasibility of rehousing all social rented tenants and some replacement homeowners into phase 3 at High Path rather than what would have been a phase 4. And likewise at Eastfields to see what we can do to accelerate as well. So that's the only thing I really wanted to flag, which is mentioned in the notes in the presentation, but hopefully you'll find that a helpful contribution. But yes, willing to answer any questions that arise from that.
Great. Thank you very much. Can I open the floor to questions, please? Councillor Horden and then Councillor Braithwaite. I can repeat the question for the sake of the live stream.
Please.
Please, we couldn't hear that.
So on the high path development, it references car-free development, but some of the residents already have cars. So what will happen with those residents who have cars? And what was the last part of your question? And I remembered accurately. There we go. That's the question.
The aim is go on. You go, Kate.
So for new residents moving into the estate, the general principle is that will be car free. But for the existing residents, we are seeking to offer one space per household.
Okay, great. Councillor Braithwaite. So, Councillor Braithwaite would like to ask about the delays that Brian, you referenced. Marsh Court was demolished several months ago.
Yes, the contractor has
hang
now
on,
been
sorry,
appointed.
The question hadn't finished. I was trying not to rely solely on my entire memory. Go on, Councillor Braithwaite. Sorry. So Councillor Braithwaite's question regards the Marsh Court, which was demolished several months ago, and it's not due to begin work until February next year. So his question relates to why there's such a long gap between a demolishment and work beginning. Surely it doesn't take this long for work to begin.
The reason, well, let me just explain where we're up to at the moment. So we have appointed the main contractor, Hill, who've now commenced on site the Abbey Road houses, replacing the former Lovell House. The reason that work doesn't start quite so quickly on Marsh Court is because as the contractor is appointed, they then have to do their technical designs to get through the building safety regulator. Technical designs following the appointment of the contractor would normally take 4 or 5 months. They have to go through an approval process with the building safety regulator, and unfortunately, due to the backlog of approvals from the building safety regulator, we are erring on the side of caution and not indicating a start on site until the building safety regulator has had the plans to approve for a period of 6 months. Now, they have a statutory target of turning them around within 13 weeks, but unfortunately, the track record at the moment is that things are taking a lot longer. Of course, we didn't used to have the building safety regulator. Your own building control officers would have previously given the approval, and they would have come through a lot more quickly and would have come through in a different process, which would have enabled the start on site to have been undertaken a lot more quickly. So the back end of that period, the 6 months, is I'm afraid entirely due to the requirement to get the building safety regulator approving the detail of the technical drawings and the plans.
Thank you very much. Can I open the floor to another round of questions, please? I think we've sorted our IT issues out. Councillor Fairclough, please, and then I'll go back.
Thank you, Chair. Really, this is a question for you and just clarification on what you said about Majestic Way. I note from the slides, it talks about a potential planning meeting in July, and I just wondered if we are suitably close to a meeting that sort of anything we could say here could prejudice it. I have one very simple question about something that he's referred to on the slide, but obviously I don't want to prejudice anything, so I just want to understand the reasoning.
I think the reasoning comes from out an abundance of caution, and it's the guidance that I received is that to speak about the planning application whilst it's still not gone through the planning committee process would potentially prejudice it, especially as some members sitting on this panel might also later on sit at the planning committee. It's a guidance that I received and that I'm following what I've been told. So Holden, I think you also had a question.
I'll defer to Councillor Austin. He wants to ask the question.
It's really just about on the Eastfields estate. So that is page 11 of the pack, talking about redesigning to incorporate the building safety requirements. What is there a risk that you won't be able to incorporate the building safety requirements? And what are the consequences of that in terms of fewer affordable homes that will be delivered if you're not able to incorporate the building safety requirements? Thank you.
No, there's no doubt that we will be able to incorporate them. It's incorporating them in the most cost-effective way possible, which is the challenge. The two different questions really, what parts to answer. One is around building safety issues, and the other is around building regulations that affect the design of houses as well as buildings which aren't deemed to be high-risk buildings, because the building safety regulator only deals with high-risk buildings, i.e. buildings of 18 meters, 6 stories roughly, and higher. We have got a couple of high-risk buildings in the current plan for the old plan, that is, for Eastfields, and these were known as the Sparks buildings. Dropping a second staircase into those buildings makes them very inefficient in terms of the layouts of the blocks, so they will need to be redesigned completely. Building regulations affecting the houses are largely to do with new regulations concerning overheating of houses and making sure that they're not overheating as the climate changes, and we are having some challenges working through the detail of those, but they're not insurmountable challenges. They're things that we've overcome, for example, with the townhouses on Abbey Road in High Path. So we need to work through the detail. There's absolutely nothing that's insurmountable. We're looking to increase the amount of affordable social rented homes on these fields as well, if we are able to secure the right amount of grants. But we are committed to providing at least the currently approved number of social rented homes on these fields. So there's no question of us diluting our commitment to the replacement social rented homes and the new social rented homes.
I'd like to pick up on this, if I can, quickly on the Eastfields estate. There's two questions I wanted to ask. One is on whether any lessons have been learned regarding communications with tenants who some of them have been moved into new properties and have seen rent increases that they were not expecting, and whether there any lessons learned have been taken from that experience to ensure this doesn't happen thereafter. And the second question was regarding homeowners and the taper deal that has been, which is, I understand, sector leading in terms of its generosity. But at the beginning of the process, Clarion told residents in writing, and they told elected representatives in writing, that this taper deal would begin once residents move into properties. I now understand in writing the taper deal only begins once. No, I misspoke. Originally in writing, the taper deal would begin at the point that the residents sold their home to Clarion. I now understand that the taper deal will only begin once residents move in. Could you please talk us through what happened here in terms of the change? And I understand the position is that this was always a temporary offer, the taper deal at the early stages. was there any written communication that you are aware of, where this was explicitly raised with residents, flagged with residents, that this is a temporary offer, and if you don't jump on this now, it might get changed at a later date?
I'll pick this up, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question. So I'll go to the rents first. So for those that aren't aware of the issue, the rents, the social rents that we had at Merton, they're calculated primarily on the actual property value. And then in addition, under government policy, housing associations are allowed to also apply a 5% uplift. So we do have a difference between the market value of a resident's existing home on that regeneration estate and the market value of the new home. So we can't change that, and that makes up a big proportion of how the social rent is calculated. But what we have done is we've removed that 5% uplift, because we do not apply that to our existing residents. Their annual rent increases do not include that. So we've removed it for our existing residents, and we also apply a rent cap that we introduced for our existing residents when interest rates were really, really high 2 or 3 years ago. So we apply that as well. So what we've tried to do is as we said we would on the resident offer, calculate the rents in exactly the same way as their rents are calculated now. What we have learnt, you're right, Councillor Johnson, is that we had not communicated that effectively and soon enough to residents. And we have absolutely changed our policy about how we do that. So we now provide residents with an estimate. We can't provide the accurate down to a penny until the homes are completed, because it's reliant on a most up-to-date valuation. But about a year before that completion happens, we can certainly do an estimate, and we will provide that to residents. And that's now in our process that we will do on all of our schemes going forward. Does that answer the question on the rents?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So on the taper, I appreciate the concern that you've raised about the tapering arrangements and the position for homeowners in the scheme. What Clarion's done is we've returned to the original resident offer, so where the taper starts from the point of purchase of the replacement home. What we had, as you're correct in your question, we had on about 5 years ago, before we had the compulsory purchase order in place, one of the things that we needed to do was be able to actually start on site. And so one of the tools that we used was to see if we could increase our resident offer even further. So the taper deal would actually start from the point of purchasing the existing home rather than when they buy the replacement home. And what we've done is we've gone back to the original offer that has been available for many years for all residents to take up. When we were reviewing how that arrangement was operating in practice, it was becoming clear that it was creating inconsistencies and can produce different outcomes for residents. Returning to that original approach ensures the policy is applied consistently. It's been running for several years, that the regeneration schemes, and homeowners have had opportunities to engage at many different times and throughout that process. The compulsory purchase order has also been available, and the residents that have already sold to Clarion have had that agreement fully honoured. So we're not taking anything away from people that have already entered that agreement with us. But for those that have not yet reached agreement, one of the things that we do is we continue to offer that taper deal and replacement home option, even beyond the CPO being granted, which is actually not in line with our resident offer. But we wanted to ensure that we're providing additional certainty and opportunity for residents. And as you said, it is a really generous offer compared to many regeneration schemes. Most schemes provide a shared equity option, but Clarion provides that as well. So we offer both full purchase and shared equity option. So it gives residents greater choice, and it supports kind of the long-term viability of the scheme. And we will continue to review our arrangements, and we will ensure that we are communicating effectively to all the homeowners as well.
Can I check? So there at no point was it made clear to residents that this was a temporary offer to entice them to engage with the scheme at a certain point. And at present, I understand you're going above and beyond what is required in a residence
On the
offer.
compulsory offer, yeah.
Right, exactly. But is there any communication reminding residents that this is still a temporary offer and that they need to take into account the nature of time when deciding about whether they want to take it or not, if that makes sense?
So there, as far as I can see, looking through the information that we've published and shared, we have not advised residents this was a temporary offer, and nor have we advised councillors. So that is correct. But one of the things that we are doing is making sure that we communicate to residents about that they have, as you're aware, they have got a number of queries and questions about the original offer anyway. So one of the things that we are trying to put in place is a session with those homeowners to really explain what it means, because there is I think some confusion amongst homeowners about what the actual taper deal is, and there's concerns as well, and we want to try and clarify all of that information and then share that with residents.
I will open up to the floor again, but I just want to pick up on the point. So at no point was this made clear to us temporary. So there's not, perhaps then you can understand all the confusion and the concern. And it seemed the impression that might be left for residents is that Clarion are changing the rules of the game after the fact. And doesn't that
So I do accept your point, and I acknowledge that we never said it was temporary. The resident offer was there and is available for all residents. And then a few years after that resident offer was published, we moved to offering this enhanced version of the taper deal. That has then remained available to every homeowner across the entire 3 schemes to take us up on. And where residents have taken us up on it to date, and it has been available for a number of years, we will honour that. But where there are still homeowners that have never taken us up and agreed with us to sell their home to us, then we are stopping that, and we are reverting back to the original offer, which is that residents will still get a fully replacement home at no additional cost to themselves, which the equity is tied into that taper arrangement. And I'm happy to provide more detail to councillors in the room in a written form explaining that, because the taper deal can be complex. But yeah, it's the original offer is effectively what is back on the table.
I will move on, but can I just get clarity? Are you certain that your position is legally watertight in terms of changing the nature of the taper deal without communicating to residents initially that this was a temporary offer? So A, are you certain that this position is legally watertight? And B, have you changed your communications now at present to remind residents that the taper deal is a temporary offer and it can also be withdrawn? So have you learned from
the taper deal? The taper deal is not temporary. The taper deal that is our offer. It's the fact that the taper deal either starts when we buy their existing home, which of those of the offers that we have accepted, these are homeowner properties. We have purchased their existing home, and then we are charging them nil rent, and their 11-year taper deal is starting at that point, which means, given the delays that we've experienced as well on the scheme, the residents could well be moving into their replacement home if they're in one of the latter phases, where the taper deal, on the day that they move into their replacement home, they have 2 or 3 years left, and they have benefited for many, many years paying a nil rent and the running down of that taper deal, which effectively means they'll be getting £250,000, £300,000 gifted to them. So I think that it's fair and more transparent that we revert back to the original. In terms of, am I certain legally, this was a negotiating tool. It was a negotiating tool. It was an enhanced offer, and it was there to encourage residents to enter an agreement with us. And that was done ahead of the CPO. Then, despite having the CPO for 2 years or so, we have continued to honour that enhanced agreement. All we are doing is reverting back to the original taper deal, which is 11 years, gifted equity, and as long as they don't sell and they remain in their home, that is gifted for them.
Thank you very much. Can I open the floor to any more questions, please? Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Fairclough. And
Thank you. Can I just ask about the flooding modelling that you're having to do at Ravensbury? Because that seems to be something new that's happening. I just want to understand why.
Yeah, it's due to final report is due to be any day now. We've had a verbal indication from the consultants, and it's proved to be good news in that the flood risk assessment has not increased in spite of some new climate data being put into the model. So we've been putting phase 3 at Ravensbury just on hold, the design work, the further design work that's needed on hold until we'd been sure that we wouldn't have to do a fundamental redesign. The good news is the flood risk modelling that was originally done holds true. So we can press ahead with phase 3. We still want to do a little bit of modest redesign of some of the properties, learning the lessons from phase 2, but it's not a wholesale redesign as we feared at one stage it might be. So the good news is the flood risk modelling has held true.
Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair. A quick point and a question, if I may. My quick point is, could my question about Majestic Way be minuted, just on the basis that all these sites seem to be potentially subject to planning and could fall foul of the same thing? There is something literally on the slide. It seems slightly odd that I can't ask that. My question was actually to come back to Councillor Johnson's point, and obviously the enhanced incentive was there for exactly that reason, to be an incentive. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about why it's now being withdrawn on the basis that Clarion also gains from the incentive.
At the moment, we it just from a viability perspective, from a fact that we don't need to secure some of these homes for a few years in terms of later phases, it's not required in terms of securing those properties. As I said, there are residents that have not agreed a position with us under the CPO, and we still continue to honour the replacement offer for those residents. So I think it's just for us, it's about trying to be fair to everybody. There are, as I said, there are homeowners benefiting hugely from that incentive and other homeowners that aren't because they're worried, concerned, etc. And I think the fairest way and most transparent way is to go back to the original offer, which is a great offer.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, going back to High Path again and the sort of delays in development, there are about 3 blocks of houses that are now being decanted and scheduled for demolition that aren't part of phase 2, and some maybe not until phase 4. Could you tell me the reason for that and why we're losing those homes?
The homes that are next scheduled for demolition are those on Pincott Road behind the Trafalgar pub or adjacent to the Trafalgar pub. We want to get those demolished pretty quickly so that the ball court can be relocated. It's proving to be a fairly extended negotiation with the owners of the Trafalgar pub to get some rights to put some scaffolding over the back of the party wall that separates the houses from the pub. We're in negotiations to try and get that consent. But it's taking a little bit of time. But those houses on Pincott Road, opposite Marsh Court, they will be coming down as soon as we get that scaffolding license agreed with the owners of the pub. Other properties scheduled for demolition fairly quickly are part of phase 3. The ones which are fronting onto Merton High Street, which are broadly speaking empty now. And then coming back, the other properties that are needed for phase 3, we've had some antisocial behaviour problems. We've had some squatters breaking into the properties. We've had some theft of copper pipes, which has led to flooding. So we're anxious that we get those down as quickly as we can also. Kate, I don't know if you want to come in on any of the other properties around the phase 4 area.
In
Or
terms
the
of
original
what,
phase
sorry?
4. Thoughts on uses that we might put to some of the properties that we've emptied out at phase 4?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been looking at when we are thinking ahead to our revised master planning is how and what will we do with potentially quite large swathes of unoccupied properties and land. And I think that's one of the key things that we're looking at in our phasing strategy. And phase 4, which was originally intended for all of the remaining people at High Path, those properties there are in quite good condition. So one of the things that we're looking at is how we might best be able to work with Merton around trying to ease some of their housing pressures. It would be on a temporary basis, but it would be for a significant period of time. And so those considerations are going on. And then it's also about perhaps creating some meanwhile use or a meanwhile destination, because what we don't want to see with lots of vacancies on that estate is rises in antisocial behaviour and difficulties around how we manage that. A lot of the homes, there is a reason we're regenerating it though. A lot of the homes do need to be regenerated. But as I said, phase 4, those properties seem to be in the best nick, the best condition across the whole scheme. So we are looking at opportunities there about how we might be able to support Merton.
Do I have any more questions from the floor? No? Well, then I'll wrap up this this part of the meeting. Thank you very much, Brian and Kate, for joining us. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Right.
Thank
so
you.
Our next item on the agenda are the Housing Association's Scrutiny Part 2. I'd like to thank Sarah Wilcox-Jones for joining us from L&Q, Colin Kavanagh for joining us from Moat, and I think you've also brought other members of your teams as well. So thank you all for joining. I would take any submissions you've made ahead of the meeting as read, but are there any, do you want to add to them? If you do, please, you have a couple of minutes, and then I'll open the floor to questions.
I'll start. Yeah. Okay. So, evening, councillors. Sarah Wilcox-Jones. So I'm the Director of Maintenance for L&Q. I look after everything that is self-delivered by L&Q employed staff for repairs and estates. So we've been on a bit of a journey in L&Q over the past couple of years. We've been certainly on a journey of improvement in the repairs space. I joined just over a year ago as a consultant just ahead of our regulatory inspection. So we had our in-depth inspection outcome in September, which I'm pleased to say was a C2. And we're now on our journey to C1. So we've done an awful lot over the past year in terms of resident engagement to look at our service offer as a landlord. We've just developed our new 5-year strategy alongside our residents. And we've done a lot of work in terms of being a large housing provider, but feeling like we have a local presence. We are the second largest housing provider in the country, but one of the things that we're really conscious of that we don't want to lose is that local community feel for our residents. So one of the pieces of work that we've done and the creation of my role was looking at repairs and estates and bringing that together in one cohesive service. And over the next year, we're going to be looking a lot more around how we can get out on our estates, in our communities, and have that kind of really intrinsic service that we can deliver for residents. It's not just estate walkabouts, but estate action days. I'm really listening to our communities. I've got some stats in the report, and I'm joined by Michelle Alexis, who is our head of compliance. So she works incredibly hard in keeping our residents safe, but she's also responsible for some really key repairs for our residents in terms of door entries, lifts, and those repairs that really do have an impact on our estates. So we'll take the paper as read, but open to questions following my colleagues from Moat.
Sure.
No, yep, okay, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Colin Kavanagh, I'm Director of Neighbourhoods at Moat, and my colleague Chris is our Head of Neighbourhoods for London and Sussex. So I've taken the presentation as read, just to give you a very quick overview. So we've got 1,500 homes in the borough, with our largest concentration being on Pollard's Hill. Obviously very, very diverse stock. And our local neighbourhood team includes neighbourhood managers, so our kind of generic housing officers, as well as estate services staff who look after our kind of grounds maintenance, trees, caretakers, and basically everything tenancy management, ASB responses, estate inspections, and compliance. I think probably some people will know Pollard's Hill represents some complex challenges, particularly around waste issues, pest control, parking, HMOs, and crime. We have done a lot of partnership working with Merton and other partners over the last couple of years. And we're just embarking on a journey now as well around support for vulnerable customers, remaining being a big priority for us and in the wider sector. So we're shortly going to be launching a resident liaison or customer liaison officer roles across our different regions, and they'll be really key to delivering our vulnerability offer. We've also given you some detail in there as well about our current performance on repairs and empty homes. So we are in the process of procuring a new permanent contract, which we're in the closing stages, so we should be able to kind of update members on obviously wider as well publicity on that procurement within the next probably couple of months. At the moment, we're in an interim contract with Mears, and we are seeing good sustained improvement in terms of repairs and also turning around empty homes, which we know has had a big impact in Merton and other boroughs. But any other questions? We're quite happy to answer.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, before I open the floor, can I quickly ask both L&Q and Moat? I note you as well. I note in your slides, L&Q talk about the estate inspections. Do you vary the times so that residents who might work full time and aren't around the properties from Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Do you vary your times to allow different types of residents to join you in these estate inspections? And secondly, do you ever knock on doors and speak to residents in their homes rather than just walk around the communal areas?
Okay, I'll start with that one. So yes, we do vary times. Part of the reason why one of the housing team was unable to attend this evening is because she's doing a walkabout on her local estate. We certainly do from the housing perspective. What I think we need to get stronger on is doing it from a property maintenance perspective as well. So I was at a resident session a couple of nights ago in Parsons Green, and that was one of the things that the residents were really calling for is they see their housing officers, they see their neighbourhood housing leads on a regular basis, but they don't see the property people. And being part of a large organisation, sometimes even internal staff can struggle to get things done. So part of my role is really making sure that my team are much more visible in that local presence. So we do it, absolutely, but we can strengthen it.
Yeah, I would say probably quite similar from Moat. We don't tend to usually vary the times we publicise the times of our estate inspections. We do knock on doors when we're out on the estates, particularly during those inspections. I think one of the things we've identified is we don't always record those conversations that take place within people's homes out on the estate. So we're doing a piece of work on that at the moment. And we also need to know sometimes what's kind of happening out of hours on the estates, get some better data on that. obviously Chris is here with me now. There has been evening meetings with residents, particularly on Pollard's Hill, and I know we had an evening meeting last week as well, which Chris attended, and a couple of members of our exec team. I don't know, Chris, if you want to give maybe just a brief overview of how that went.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, so as Colin's explained, one of the key things, and as Sarah has explained for L&Q, is making sure that our staff are visible and accessible out on our estates. So I think kind of building on what Colin said, whilst we are kind of flexible to kind of customers' individual needs, what we do try to make sure is that we're making ourselves visible and known, and certainly reflecting on customer feedback where maybe they are frustrated at maybe not seeing change being delivered. One of the key things that we can do to deliver that is to make sure that we're engaging those customers and encouraging them to have those walkarounds. As Colin said, we're holding periodic meetings. We're fortunate enough to have an office space on Montgomery Close in Pollard's Hill Estate, and that provides us with the ability for people to both have kind of structured meetings at kind of prefixed times, but also to facilitate people having a drop in. And one of the things that we do want to explore expanding further is the ability to hold surgeries more regularly, so that people don't have to revert to calling our customer contact centre or sending an email, so we can actually deal with those queries firsthand, face to face ideally.
Can I open the floor to questions, please? Councillor Henry and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the officers from different organisations for their report and update. What I want to ask about, I'm one of the councillors in Pollard's Hill, and first of all, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Moat Housing Association for all the hard work they have been doing in the area as the largest housing association. However, what I'd like to find out and get some more understanding is about the repair outcome and timeline, so we can know exactly when someone do report a issue of repair, we know that that will be done in X time, because I found sometimes it's we have a challenge where that is concerned. A repair may last up to maybe 6 months before it has been done. So we would like to know, a little bit more about how you go about it and the inspection after the repair has been done.
So thanks, John. It is a very valid question. So we ended our relationship with our previous repairs contractor around about a year ago. On the back of that, we had a very large number of works in progress, several thousand at the time, which we've been reducing since we've been in an interim arrangement with Mia. Certainly one of the points that we've picked up on where we're not doing as well as we need to be doing is basically return calls. So it's a mix of not being clear, I think, with the customer from the outset. So if they've booked a repair, we're not always telling, they will book an appointment in, but we're not always being clear enough, I think, in terms of follow-on appointments from the outset. So that's something we're very, very much aware of, and that we are working on in terms of our procurement at the moment. We are reducing the number of times, so the number of outstanding repairs and the time to complete repairs is reducing, but it is a work in progress. And when we have our permanent procurements and the new contracts are coming in later in the year, we do expect to see improvements, but we're certainly not where we want to be at this moment in time. I don't know, John, if that's answered your question or.
I'll just add a bit from L&Q perspective. So very similar situation. We were carrying a large backlog of work this time last year. We've done some fantastic work onboarding new contractors and growing our in-house repairs team. And in year one, we actually reduced the number of open orders by 44%. We have an aim at the moment for this year, because we have seen a peak in demand. We're seeing about 300 additional repairs a week in comparison to this time last year. We do roughly around 20,000 repairs a month. we were aiming to have what we call 2 weeks worth of WIP. So that's 2 weeks that we can keep our staff and contractors engaged, but actually we're getting to residents much more quickly. We're about 3 weeks at the moment, so we're about a week behind where we want to be because of that increase of demand. But we are also actively recruiting. So we've got a huge recruitment campaign at the moment to get some more additional skilled trade staff into L&Q. And our aim for next financial year will be to be at that 2.5 weeks worth of work in progress, so we can get to residents much more quickly. And we are seeing an increase in our customer satisfaction as we've cleared those repairs out.
Can I just pick up on Councillor Henry's question, and especially the response from Moat? I couldn't see in your slides any stats about customer satisfaction. Is this something that you measure? And with regards to your new contractor that you brought in, what data points will you use to assess the efficacy of this contractor? How will you determine whether it's been a success or not?
Yeah, sure. So I think we did mention customer satisfaction. It's risen. So before Mia's came in, it was around about 71%, and it's just over 85%. I think we've got that in maybe on slide 8 in there, or it should be in there. Yeah, slide 8. So it's just the halfway down customer success team.
Great. And what about the data points to assess efficacy of the new contractor?
So the procurement exercise hasn't finished yet. I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I'm certainly very happy to take that away, and we'll be able to come back to you if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just make the point that these slides were only received at lunchtime today, and most of us work, and I just don't think that's fair on residents, panel members, or actually representatives to have that little scrutiny time. So just if that could be noted, please.
I am in complete concurrent. Would L&Q and Moat like to explain the delay behind why these slides are so late?
So from my perspective, they were late. I had sent them over, I think it was Wednesday last week, but Ross hadn't received them, so I resent them today. So apologies, I hadn't followed up on the fact that there wasn't an acknowledgement that they were here. But even then, I appreciate with work that is a tight turnaround time. So that's something I'll take away.
Yeah, I think likewise, we sent them over Friday, but it was quite late in the day on Friday, so I appreciate Ross won't have had time probably to get them forward over today, so apologies, we should have had them over to you earlier last week.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Just on empty homes, so voids, it'd be helpful to understand what the average turnaround time is and just overall trends, whether they're going up and down. And then secondly, on repairs, I know you've talked a bit about speaking to residents in person, but what's the main way that you collect satisfaction rates around repairs, and do you feel that you are reaching enough residents to get a kind of representative sample? What particularly on L&Q, I saw on slide 9, having a quick whiz through, the overall rates are stated for this year as 57%, but then on slide 10 it says customer satisfaction is 77. So also just understanding that difference in numbers as well, please.
Okay, so I'll start with the difference in numbers. So the slide 9 is our tenant satisfaction measures. So that was the measures that were brought in under the Consumer Standards and the Regulation, Social Housing Regulation Act, that all housing providers need to complete and return on a yearly basis. The other customer satisfaction is captured through our satisfaction surveys. So once a repair is completed, a percentage of those will go to an external company and they will do the surveys. So they're our official kind of metrics that we report to board, and they are on our scorecards. We do capture customer satisfaction off the back of every repair. If we have a valid telephone number, the resident, if they have opted to have contact from us, will receive a text message. If they are unhappy, then that gets followed up from a phone call from somebody in the office to pick that up. In terms of our voids, we have a really small number of voids actually in Merton. We've only had 3 voids in the past year. And the average number for our major voids was 75 days. which is it's a high number, but major void would constitute something like new kitchens, bathrooms, rewires. So it's a real refit. In terms of our minor voids, we had one, and that was 18 days to turn it round. And we've got one that's currently still in inspection for us to turn that around and get that ready for a resident to move into.
So yeah, similarly with our satisfaction on repair. So once a repair has been completed, a customer, as long as they're happy to share their feedback, they'll receive a text message from us. That's called real-time customer feedback. So we'll be able to get feedback once the operative has left. And on the second question, I'm going to need to come back to just where we are at the moment, if that's okay, with the number of days properties are void for. It is reducing, but again, it was affected by the works in progress. But I can certainly share those figures later in the week, if that's okay. Thank you.
On the voids, can I pick up on the issue in that not all voids are the same. Some voids will require significant and extensive work, and some voids can be turned around quite quickly. But as a local authority, it can be quite difficult to know what the situation is on the ground. So has any consideration been given to introducing a type of system, perhaps like a traffic light system, which says some voids are like red, this is going to take a lot of work to turn around, and some voids green, it'll take a little bit of work, but it'll help local authorities plan much more. Is this something that you're considering and something you could perhaps roll out?
Yeah. So I think just from most perspective, we kind of have that in progress already. So it's what's called a major void, and then kind of typical void. We've started meeting fortnightly as well with, I think it's Elliot, over on the allocations team over at Merton. So Dave, just myself and Chris met with them about 2-3 weeks ago, I think. And on the back of that, we've started fortnightly meetings. So that's with his team and our local team. So we've got a much clearer picture as to kind of what's coming down the pipeline. We know where we've got customers in place, so they're the homes we're prioritising. So within Merton, there's been some customers have been waiting a very, very long time for the property they've been assigned to. So we're in a much clearer position as to when those homes will be ready going forward.
From an L&Q perspective, we work with the same model as major and minor voids, but absolutely welcome closer working relationship in terms of following suit with Moat in those more regular communications with our inner London local authorities, for sure.
Any more questions? Councillor Horden.
Just a general question. You mentioned your main estates, but some wards like Village and Hillside don't have big estates. We tend to have scattered houses, and we don't always seem to get the same attention from housing associations as a consequence. So how do you make sure those individual houses that are scattered around get the same attention? And also, is it possible if you could let us know which ones you have in our area so we can always help assist you?
Yeah, so I think most of obviously the biggest number of homes concentrations on Pollard's Hill, and then we've got quite a few smaller estates and blocks. Most of those will have monthly state inspections, and that will be in addition to any kind of ad hoc visits. We'll also obviously have our kind of cleaning contractors attending most cases weekly, and then our grounds contractors every other week. But I might pass over to Chris. He might have a bit more kind of in the detail in Merton as well.
Yeah, certainly. I'd be disappointed to hear feedback if it is the case that we're providing a different level of service, and I think the same would go for L&Q and Clarion and so on and so forth. If customers in dispersed homes, as opposed to on larger estates, are receiving a different service, they should all receive exactly the same service. Certainly, Moat are very happy to provide a stock list and to meet with you to talk about some of your priority areas. We certainly have priority areas of our own where we've identified either management issues or investment issues that need prioritising. We're very happy to share those plans and understand your priorities and those of your constituents as well. And yeah, any time that we can hold a surgery to address specific issues in specific areas, excuse me, we're very happy to facilitate that.
And same for us as well. So very open to having that open dialogue for those particular areas.
Great. Any more questions for this item on the agenda? Great. Well, thank you very much, both teams, for coming. It's very appreciated. Have a lovely rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Great. We're going to move on to the next item of business, which is the housing revenue account. We have Jeremy Smalley here to speak to the report. I'm going to take the report as read, and we also have the cabinet member for housing, of course, Councillor Andrew Judge. I'm going to take the report as read, but does anyone want to have a couple of minutes to add anything further to the report, or can I open it straight up to questions?
I think we can go straight to questions, Chair, unless Councillor Judge has anything to add.
Fantastic. Are there any questions for this item of business? I see Councillor Cedar hasn't spoken, so I'll go Councillor Cedar first.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the report and sort of understanding about trying to get an understanding of the housing revenue account, how will opening a housing revenue account benefit Merton's finances?
It won't necessarily benefit the council's finances. The housing revenue account, when it's opened, is a ring-fenced account. So it's within the general fund. There is a ring-fenced account into which income from rent will go and cover the cost of repairs and maintenance of the residential properties and the costs related to tenancy officers. So it's quite a regulated account. There are all kinds of rules around what housing revenue account funding can be spent on. There is some opportunity to use some of the housing revenue account income to fund, so like a proportion of my time, for instance, or a proportion of some of the council's overheads.
Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question, me and Matt's going to have a couple of questions. One of the problems with having the house in stock again is how do you limit or prevent the problems arising that we had last time we had a house in stock, where things get tired over years or it becomes expensive to maintain and run? What's going to sort of prevent you from having to then offload in the future?
Councillor Judge.
I think one of the issues with the housing revenue account is that it introduces a financial discipline. One of the problems with council housing in the period of the last 40 years has been low expenditure on maintenance by councils. And so housing that would otherwise, if it were well maintained, be good housing, of a character which in other countries could well be, in some cases, privately owned with concierges and good maintenance budgets, have been left in Britain because of a lack of money for councils to become dilapidated. And so it's really important in looking forward at our new housing stock, which shouldn't have any historic backlog of disrepair, that is well constructed. And we've got to make sure our own housing that we're building directly, 75 homes, or the housing that's going to be built by Berkeley Homes and bought by us is well constructed, and that is an immediate task. But we must make sure in the housing revenue account that we have ample and adequate maintenance budgets and that we maintain them well going forward. And so that will be a hands-on task from the initiation of the housing revenue account and the receipt of the houses from the developers, in Berkeley Homes case, or directly from the council's construction in the future.
Councillor Henry
sorry.
next.
Sorry, could I just add to that? Thank you very much. So it's a good question, and I think there's a couple of things to bear in mind. Firstly, right to buy legislation meant that often the best stock was bought using right to buy. So many councils were left with legacy of their worst quality stock, which is disproportionately more expensive to maintain. So they lost some of the rent roll, and they disproportionately bore some of the holding costs of the less good stock. And to compound that situation in recent years, there's been a rent cap imposed on councils with housing revenue accounts. And that has meant that the rental income has declined quite substantially compared with the increasing costs of doing works to maintain property. So it's a perfect storm, really. And as Councillor Judge has said, this is an opportunity to start afresh. And in developing a 30-year housing revenue account business plan, we're making provisions for repairs and maintenance, which is an ongoing allowance, plus we put a reserve for major repairs.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair. Will the officers please explain to us what impact will opening a housing revenue account of an house building in Merton, please?
Jeremy, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, so I think it's about, if I understood the question correctly, it's about the benefit really is that as a landlord, the tenants have some democratic recourse. So you will be a landlord. You as councillors have oversight of the council's housing services. Unlike in some cases where registered providers are more remote and less responsive to some of their tenants' needs. And I think very much the vision is that actually it's the council is a good entity. We're a landlord who is not going to go anywhere. Merton will always be here.
Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for the report. I've got two related questions on timeframes. So the first is sort of how quickly would becoming a stock holding authority reduce the amount of money we spend on temporary accommodation at the moment? And the second and related question is, obviously we're going to need to build the internal expertise to manage housing stock, and what is the time frame around that development of that expertise?
Thank you very much. So in terms of how quickly it will help to reduce some of the TA spend, we'll start to see some impact in 2027 when the first stock, the 75 that are on site, start to complete and get handed over. Of course, not all the 75 will be available for temporary accommodation because they will be let through a choice-based lettings, and there are some priority cases that come before people in temporary accommodation. But as you know, there is a banding for people in temporary accommodation, so there will be some for people in temporary accommodation. So from 2027, that will start to have a positive impact. The Cabinet decision previously to acquire stock in year, which we're doing at the moment, that will have an impact in this year. But that will be held in the general fund, not the HRA. In terms of building internal expertise, that's something that we're looking at in terms of the HRA business plan overall. So it's likely in the short to medium term, we will look to procure a managing agent with the expertise, but with a view to when the housing revenue account gets sufficient income to then start to develop the in-house team capable of doing that work. So we'll be able to offer more clarity over the coming year as to what that taper point is.
Councillor Judge.
I think it's worthwhile adding that right now we do manage 18 properties which have been placed on a final management order, and therefore the management has been removed from the landlord. as not being a fit and proper person, a corporate person to manage the properties. So those properties are managed by a private company called Chisel. They are bringing their own capacity and expertise to bear, and I'm sure working with Chisel in managing those properties and potentially managing further properties that we acquire will be a learning experience.
Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the document, Jeremy. You mentioned that the establishment of a special purpose vehicle is an alternative to the HRA, but I didn't see it, I presumably misread, I didn't see it included in the options considered at section 10 that you were putting to us. Can you explain, and if an SPV were used, would that make any difference? The question that was raised earlier on about the impact on the TA accommodation and the expense of that, I'm wondering whether things can be done more quickly and save us money.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so aside from the HRA, what we're working on is a housing business plan. So how will housing be delivered across the borough? Now, some of that will be delivered by private developers. Some of it will be delivered by the council invested in the housing revenue account. The reference to the special purpose vehicle is a reference to thinking about, are there tenure types that the council can't offer, like shared ownership, that might be more appropriate to meeting housing need? And therefore, one mechanism could be that we open up a special purpose vehicle which acts as a landlord entity and is able to have shared ownership because of the rules related to that, as opposed to the HRA. Sorry, I'm not being very clear here, I realise. So the council can only offer a lifetime tenancy, and it's a social rent tenancy. Whereas it might be more appropriate for a special purpose vehicle, for instance, to offer a short hold tenancies for a period of 5 years or something, on a renewal basis. So it gives us some more flexibility, and it's something I know Councillor Judge was very keen that we look at as and has been borne out really by the Mayor's recent announcement about key worker living rent. So again, that's something we're looking at.
Councillor Judge, do you want to feed in on this?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is very much part of our forward plans and anticipation for the council. So at the moment, we've got a programme, I think, of 248 homes, of which 221 are being purchased, and they will be 75 of our own, some from Berkeley Homes. They will be all social rent. They will all be heading for the housing revenue account. But in future, as we develop further areas of land in the borough, we will be looking for a diversity of tenure on those estates. So we haven't settled on the fractions, and it may differ from site to site, but you may be looking at an average perhaps of half of all the housing being social rents, going in the housing revenue account, and a significant amount of housing either going for shared ownership or for affordable rents of one sort or another. Because the situation we're in at the moment, which we're all aware of, is that housing is increasingly unaffordable, whether for people seeking to buy their own housing or seeking to rent in the private sector. And so we're in the situation now where councils perhaps have a moral duty to take a lead in assisting and intervening in the housing sector as a whole to try and provide housing that meets the aspirations of residents. And that will mean on every estate in future, not the ones we're currently building on, because we've got 10,500 people in the housing register, but on every estate, a future estate, we'd be looking for a diversity of tenure.
Councillor Willison.
Thank you for the report. Can I just check a couple of the figures and then a couple of questions as well? I think we've got about 10,000 households on the waiting list, and then is it 220 homes per year that we get nominated? Is that right? I wasn't quite clear with that 220 figure.
Historically, it's been at around 250 a year that
Okay.
we get from RPs, registered providers, to nominate. It's fallen quite considerably in the last 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
More down to 100, 150. So again, you can see there's a
Yeah.
yeah.
The pressure. Okay, so on there was a mention of some, I guess, an organisation called Resonance, and they're acquiring homes. Just wondered what that related to. And then the second question was around you were asking if we can approve kind of acquiring homes out of borough within commuting distance, just to understand what commuting distance is, and whether if suddenly we were having to acquire more outside borough, would that come back to committee? Like, is there a point where we say actually we're tipping too far in the wrong direction?
Yeah, thank you. So the first one in relation to resonance, that was a decision the council took in its treasury management, where it invested some money in a fund operated by Resonance. It gets a return on its investment, and in addition, Resonance are looking to provide the council with some accommodation that it can use for temporary accommodation. And we've recently set up some closer monitoring about when we might get those handovers. I think we've had 3 to date so far, but the intention was more like 20. But I need to understand over what period. The thing about acquiring out of borough is, I think our preference would always be to acquire properties, particularly for temporary accommodation in borough. But we have seen instances where there are things that are attractive to buy, perhaps in Croydon or nearby places where the connections to the borough are still very good. So, you know, we talked about whether it was within 30 minutes of the borough by public transport. And forgive me, because the report was November, I think, that went to council. Sorry, to cabinet. I don't think we specified that on a map, but it's fair to say I hear what you're saying. Where we've got acquisitions that are going to be out of borough, it is something that we'll look at very carefully.
Councillor Mercer.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow that up, we know that we do put people into accommodation quite a lot further than half an hour away for reasons which at the time are understandable in the extreme circumstances we have. Is there any chance of defining our commutable distance formally or giving some thought to that? Because, you know, it's all very well, we talk about half an hour here, it sounds sensible. If we discover it's an hour and 45 minutes in a year's time, then, you know, I think I would rather we could try and agree something that was.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I hear you. I think we have to remember that some people are placed out of borough by choice, and that's an important mechanism, particularly in some cases like domestic violence, for instance. But I understand your point that it needs to be commutable connections within the borough, particularly for those properties that we're acquiring, and not least because we will want to make sure that we can manage and maintain those properties. So I'm happy to take that away and come up with something that prescribes that boundary parameters.
Great. Any more questions? Great. I will wrap up this item of the agenda then. Thank you very much. The next section we have is performance monitoring. Caroline Bruce has asked me to extend her sincerest apologies as she's not able to be here in person, but I understand Jeremy has kindly volunteered to answer any questions she might be able to answer on her behalf. And should that not be possible, then Caroline has also asked me to flag that she will answer any questions we cannot answer tonight in writing, in addition to her sincere apologies. Do we have any questions on the performance monitoring? Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologise, Jeremy. I had a question for Caroline, so you may or may not be able to answer it. So we're told here that 95.6% of street cleaning reports are rectified within contract. Presumably, we don't have a contract as such. We must sort of now just have a defined time, because obviously street cleaning is dealt with in-house. My question was, is that of all reports, or is it of those reports where there is an inspection and a determination that action should be taken? And my point being that obviously residents often feel that a street is not clean and they report it. An inspection is held and it's not felt that the street has fallen below grade and therefore no action is taken. And then they're told that 95% of streets are dealt with within the timeframes. In their experience, they're not, and that I appreciate is their misunderstanding. But I'd be interested to know if that is just of those where you get my point.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will need to go back and double check, and I don't mean to just brush off the question. I think what I am aware of is Fix My Street and Alloy are now working really well, and we've seen a dramatic improvement. But I understand what your question is about. Is it that we deem it, or is it that the residents deem it? And I'll come back to you if that's okay.
Councillor Horton.
Yes, just to further add to that point, residents feel that there is a difference of opinion from what they think is a clean road to what the council does. So is there a way to make the council's definition clearer? Because the public might be quite surprised that their view differs.
Yeah, so that's just about clarifying the standards, isn't it, of what we deem to be acceptable versus what residents feel is acceptable, and that sort of perception. So again, if it's okay, Councillor Holden, I'll take that away and come back to you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I think this might be one as well that you have to take away, because actually I think I asked it before, which was on the antisocial behaviour cases, and the measure is acknowledged within service timescales. I'm just curious to know, is that the sole measure? Because that was the one that was in there before, and I think that was my previous question, or are there others? Because I would think sort of turnaround time rather than just acknowledging, because acknowledging could just be the auto reply that you get. So just to understand more about what that involves, but perhaps that's another one that needs to go back, Jeremy, because I think.
Yeah, sorry, not much use am I for for standing in for Caroline, but yeah, no, I'll take that away, Councillor Wilson, and come back to you. Apologies.
Okay, Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you. I've got a question for you, Jeremy, that actually is for you, I hope. Obviously, we have the performance monitoring of the processing of applications, major and minor applications, and I appreciate that's for Q3. But obviously, we've had the new planning software, and I'm sure colleagues are the same, have picked up dissatisfaction from a number of people about the speed at which there have been planning application validations, and I wondered if you might give us a quick update.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is the transition to a system called iDocs, which generally should improve overall serviceability, and people should be able to access applications and look at them and comment online. So generally it should be a good improvement. And that work is now finished, and we're just uploading the applications and data that came in during the time that the system was down. So I'm very grateful for applicants' patience. We have tried to manually register applications in that time and commence the determination of them. But you're right. I mean, this will show the previous quarter as opposed to the next one.
Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Henry, sorry.
Thank you. I notice in the housing, temporary accommodation continue to be very, very high. And what I wanted to find out now that we're building new houses, will most of these residents who are in temporary accommodation, will they be able to access some of the new built projects or house?
Thank you. Some will, because they will qualify with enough points to do so, but not all of them. And you're right, it's very difficult time in terms of numbers. What I can say is that we've actually stabilized over the last quarter the numbers of people in temporary accommodation. That's partly because we're able to discharge our duty and move people out of temporary accommodation. It's partly also been due to a push to get the registered providers to hand over void stock more quickly. And it's partly a symptom of some new stock being offered to us to be able to nominate into. And as was reported at the previous panel, we've got a number of measures which we're taking to try and bear down on cost. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Do we have Councillor Austin and then Councillor Holden?
A question more about how you for the temporary accommodation metric, how you determine the metric. So without rehearsing everything that we covered on the last item, clearly there's been this exponential growth. And I don't know how to ask this without it sounding slightly crude, but what figures would you expect to see in your reporting for this to be classified as amber or green? I appreciate you're not, 0 would be optimal, but that's not realistic. And I just wondered how you sort of mark your homework on the temporary accommodation one. At the moment it's red, but what would we expect to see as a more acceptable level, if that's the right phrase?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question in terms of what are our targets that we're setting. And it's an awful, I know we all appreciate it's awful because we're talking about people in housing crisis. But I think for us to firstly get it back to a point where we're not overspending, and the numbers get back to the point where we're able to afford within budget temporary accommodation. And then longer term, of course, is to bring the numbers down to a much more realistic target. It's just we're just inundated with demand, and it's a demand side that we can't control. So I'll give some thought to that, and perhaps that's one I can bring back to the panel in future. Thank you.
Councillor Holden. Oh, sorry, Councillor Judge wants to come in as well.
I think it's apparent, certainly apparent to me as the cabinet member, that a lot of the cause for temporary accommodation are private sector landlords evicting people and using Section 21 notices. And we've had an instance recently in Colliers Wood where up to hundreds of people are being evicted by one landlord. And this is possibly related to the fact that as of the 1st of May, it will no longer be possible for landlords to evict people using Section 21 notices. And certainly one landlord in Colliers Wood has been seeking to evict people, it would appear, in order to offer the accommodation to local authorities for temporary accommodation, knowing they can get more money for that. And that was a obviously deeply unkind approach for a landlord, I would say an irresponsible landlord, to take to their own tenants. So it's very difficult for us to judge what is the behaviour landlord's going to be, except that after May, it won't be possible for landlords to bring further Section 21 notices. They'll have to bring it for other reasons, such as non-payment of rent or antisocial behaviour, rather than no reason at all.
Councillor Holden.
Yeah, thank you. Your planning numbers here look reasonably good, but one area that we regularly receive complaints on is planning enforcement and lack of responding to the public and to ward councillors. Is there a way to sort of monitor that and try to improve that response? Because it's an area of, normally when we get contacted, there's something serious happened and the public want and expect the council to respond and help them out.
Thank you. So we have about 300 open planning enforcement cases. at the moment. It's a small team, and they do a very good job with the limited resource that they've got. Of course, the issues that people raise in terms of breach of enforcement can vary hugely. Some of which are, they haven't complied with one particular condition, others more substantial unauthorized works. And of course, what we have to do all the time is make a judgment about which are the ones that are really important that we prioritize. And so we do quite a lot of work prioritizing those cases that are most important. And by that, I mean calling to question the credibility of the planning service if we're not enforcing something. But inevitably, we're in a situation where we can't monitor and enforce everything. There is an obligation on applicants and owners to comply with their planning permission.
Do we have any more questions with this item of the agenda? Nope. Then I will move on to the quarterly performance reports. Do we have any questions on the quarterly performance reports? Councillor Wilson.
Who's answering the questions on this one? Sorry.
I think it's a similar situation to the last one.
Okay. I just had quite a few questions around weed management because there's been a change recently in particularly Merton Garden Street volunteers who have historically weeded manually streets, but now there's a new process. But I'm just wondering if that's something I can ask on, or if it's better to send separately, Jeremy, or unless Councillor Neveson, it's something you could speak to. I don't know about weed management. Sorry, I was asking about whether weed management is something that anyone can answer questions on, or whether it needs to be sent separately.
Is that something which Caroline Bruce would be better? I think I'll ask Rob to take a note of this and we'll get a written response.
Can I also just say, though, we've had so many meetings when, and thank you, Jeremy, for coming. We've had so many meetings when officers haven't turned up, and it's just, what's the point, really, is my main question.
I think there are extenuating circumstances in this situation, and
They're not subs, though, and I don't know, because there's quite a few different officers that are not here on for these papers. That's all. Not just. I understand, Caroline. That's absolutely understand, but just.
I take the point. And
yeah.
Should we, whatever happens after May, should any of us all be here again, I'm sure this will be something that will be fed on for the next composition of the SUSCOM panel, whenever that happens in the next municipal year. Do you have any more questions on the quarterly performance reports? Great. Then the action log, which is a bit moot as we are at the end of the municipal year now. But are there any questions on the action log as it currently stands? I suspect not. Great. Then the work program. So we had a task group on the compulsory purchase orders, and there's been some difficulty in getting the appropriate hurdles be jumped through to get it here. But I understand everyone should have a paper copy of the report that was prepared. It is on the side over here. I'm sorry if I didn't flag it at the very beginning of the meeting. But yeah, could you please? The CPO task group, especially as we're quite pressured for time, we prepared a report that there was basically framed around four key questions. What is it? Number one, what is the current legislative landscape around CPOs for local authorities, and what are the expected changes? Number two, what considerations must the council take into account before it commences with CPO, and are there certain conditions that must be met? Number three, what process must the local authority follow to proceed with a CPO, and what are the expected timeframes? And number four, what are the risks for local authorities like Merton in pursuing a CPO, and what are the expected costs? I want to put on record my sincere thanks to to Sharon Evans, the monitoring officer, who helped acquire some expert external witnesses, barristers from Cornerstone Chambers, who came in to feed in their expertise. And it is on the basis of this evidence that we have been able to prepare this report, which is effectively a factual document summarizing what councils can and cannot do with CPOs. And it was an intention of the task group for this to basically serve as a starting point. We're all quite acutely aware that the municipal year is ending very soon. So for this to serve as a starting point, perhaps should the future SUSCOMS panel be interested to pick up this work, at least we have a common shared basis of facts about what the current situation is for CPOs and what authorities like Merton can or cannot do. So for this part of the meeting, we can just take the CPO task report as the report from the CPO task group as noted. But does anyone want to feed in or have any comments or anything they'd like to say on this topic or issue? Great, Councillor Holden.
Yes, thank you. I've not had time to read the report yet, but as a general principle, what sort of response have you had from the cabinet member about this, and what interests have they had, and how will it be used going forwards?
The cabinet member was incredibly fast in turning around the report and signed off on it. It is my understanding, and has been supportive of the efforts of the task group. But the task group were quite clear. We wanted people external to Merton feeding in expertise rather than it's doing this all in-house, if that makes sense. Great. Well, as this is our final meeting of the year, are there any comments people want to make about how they felt this SUSCOMS year has gone? Any improvements apart from the ones that have been noted earlier on, which will certainly be taken away? And are there any feedback that people would like to give as this is our last meeting? I see Councillor Henry, then I go to Councillor Mercer.
I just want to say this task group, especially this one, what we've just finished, was very educational because what we have covered, for me personally, I had no clue about it until on the day when we have all the officers and, solicitors involved. So I think that was very good. And yeah, really good. I think we've done a very good job.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. My personal feeling is that we have spent a lot of time this year focusing on the various providers of accommodation and what they've done and not done, which I think is obviously important work. I think all of us have accommodation which that relates to, but I think that has dominated what we've done this year, and it's meant, for example, that we haven't heard on various things. We haven't had a chance to read this, which is probably great, but I haven't a clue. And we haven't had walking and cycling strategy, which we've been promised for quite some time. So there's obviously things to follow up when we get to the next round. But I think we have to be careful. If we do say, for example, that we want to allow 1 year in a 4-year cycle to be dominated by housing, that's fine. If alternatively we want to spread it a bit more, then that's another way of doing it.
Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you. I'm sure we don't have the figures to hand, but I wonder how many recommendations we've passed and what has become of them.
I think that is in the report, isn't it? To the very back, the final pages, you can see a summary of the recommendations we passed and their progress. So yes, it goes into our annual report as well. But it's on pages 78 of the 74 of the document, 78 of the PDF. You can see our recommendations and how they have gone. Is my understanding. Councillor Wilson.
Just following on from Councillor Mercer's point on things that sort of get bumped forward, I think it's helpful. So, for example, the tree strategy part 2, I think that was supposed to come in last year's cycle, actually. So I think it's just helpful to understand just a brief note as to why we're not seeing it coming when we're expecting it at the next meeting, because normally what happens is it just gets shifted, but there's no actual explanation. So I think it's just helpful to have that in future as well, please, Chair.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you. Councillor Holden.
Yeah, thank you. I echo the other points. Some of the data has been on some meetings kind of inaccurate or wrong or not up to date. So maybe in future, once the next term happens, that if we can get that ironed out and so we get the right format every meeting, that will be good to compare from meeting to meeting. And another thing that we haven't really done much recently is site visits and looking around at stuff out in the field. I think that's sometimes a useful thing that we have done in the distant past in this committee. And I think in the next cycle, when there'll be different councillors, that'll be a good opportunity to literally get them on a bus and have a look at things.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Christie.
Chair, can I say I think you've done a great job this year as chair. I also think in relation to the time we've spent scrutinising and asking questions of the housing associations that we have this year has been vital. I think we should probably as a council have a dedicated housing scrutiny committee, given the importance of that specific issue, and certainly to me, and I'm sure many of my colleagues across all sides, the issue of housing and people in housing provided by housing associations is such a vast part of the casework and the issues that we deal with. So the opportunity that you've created for us to scrutinise and challenge and put questions directly to housing providers this year, I think has been really valuable, and I hope that that continues in future iterations. If we don't move to a system of having a committee focused on scrutinising housing providers, and going forward, given the establishment of a HRA, our own housing operations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for all the feedback. Genuinely, I really appreciate it. Thank you. And I think Ross is also open to having any suggestions emailed over to him. And Ross is a continuity person, so no matter what happens after May, this feedback will be taken on board, and Ross will be supporting whoever may find themselves in this chamber and in this role again. So thank you guys very much. It's been a Councillor Henry, the last word.
I just would like to say thanks to Billy and Lashmi, because I think this will be the last meeting, and it's a pleasure working with both of you, and I hope we continue to keep in touch wherever you go.
Okay. Thank you guys very much for a fantastic final meeting of the municipal year. I close this meeting. Thank you very much.